Hello everybody, this is Snaris again, and this is my RWBY Grimm Eclipse difficulty solo walkthrough. And this is chapter 2, technical difficulties, and I'm playing as Weiss. So Weiss is a pretty interesting character there, and right there you saw I just had my menu screen open just so I could show you what all the different skills I'm utilizing is when she's at level 10. And pretty much how I play Weiss is area of effect control. So what she does really well is freezing the ground around her and catching multiple enemies in frozen traps. And what this allows me to do is it creates a barrier in which other Grimm get stuck on, or stuck on the other side of. Some of them can still hit me through it, obviously, but yeah. It creates a wall of defense and I can focus on other Grimm. Or it just freezes a whole lot of them together, allowing them to take more damage, either through heavy attacks or just by doing more of the same and keeping them constantly frozen. Now these are the Borbatus Grimm, I believe they're called. With these, when they do that roly-poly thing, you need to dodge out of the way and hit circle as they go by. Otherwise, you just wait for them to stop rolling, and then you just hold down triangle for a heavy attack, and then launch into R1 to kill them. Unfortunately, Weiss's heavy attack charge is not very big, and as far as damage goes, she's fast but doesn't do a lot of damage and doesn't really cover a lot of area. Her evade is really good, especially in the air. And her ultimate, from the way I've designed it, basically just creates like a frozen field around her and everything gets frozen when they touch it and takes tons of damage. It's really good. But overall, out of all the characters, I'd say she's actually designed the weakest. That's my ultimate, but these things don't really get frozen, or at least not so easily. It's better off for the numerous Beowulf and those other little Grimm that burrow into the ground. So this fight here is a little bit tedious, but it's not super bad. You're just kind of getting used to the idea of it. And again, this is what I mentioned about balance not really working for solo players. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention as well, if you hold down R2 you'll do gun attacks. RWBY has a pretty good gun attack, Weiss doesn't have a very good one. It tracks the enemies, which is good, but yeah, it's not so great. Yang's is good for up close because it's like a shotgun, and if you do it for long enough she fires off a couple of missiles, which are okay, but yeah, whatever. But I do think Blake by far has the best gun, especially when you get the stun blade upgrade, and I'll show you why in a couple of missions, because you know, I'm going to need that in particular to rely on to beat the game. Otherwise, I don't know how else I could do it solo. There's a little bit of a transition there, and that's because I died on the sequence. I got to the end of wave 4 and I died to some bullshit. I got too cocky, and one after the other, the enemies came out of the ground and hit me, or the Beowulf struck me as I was trying to get away, and I ended up getting downed. And because I'm playing alone, no one can revive me, no one can get me up, so I got to start the encounter again. And I think, because it's a little bit late, seeing as how I've already started doing the recording, I don't really want to go back on it. I think I'll keep it as it is right now, but I think going forward, if there's some missions I remember being a little bit tedious with some of the encounters, I'll speed things up. I'll just do a little bit more editing. But as of right now, I think Weiss has some really good uses, especially if you use her in co-op. She'd work great alongside RWBY and with Blake. Maybe not so much Yang though. Like Yang's pretty fun to use, because I don't know what it is, but I think it was her, and seeing her all those years ago rocking the shotgun gauntlets was what really got me into the idea of, like, you know, sort of like how Virgil uses Beowulf, you know, like gauntlet based weapons. And the balance for solo is not all that fun. That's why it's much more equipped to be played by multiple players, not a single person. I think what I would have preferred, even on Eclipse difficulty, is if the Grimm were tougher, but you didn't have to fight so many of them, just because, well, it's just fucking tedious, isn't it? Like you saw the last chapter, the Grimm really weren't all that difficult. All that was difficult was trying to keep them all off the control node, because there's just that many of them that, little by little, they were wearing it down and destroying it. And they almost got it. And it's kind of sad, because I think this combat can actually work rather well for a RWBY game especially. It's just that their scope was too narrow. You know, it's possible their budget was also too small, because, you know, Rooster Teeth were pretty known for starting several projects, or, you know, starting up merch or some sort of other product line, and it never really went anywhere or had poor advertising. They just didn't really know how to market things, and it kind of made me wish they went back to the old school way of doing things, where they were more independent, less corporate, and it ended up being their undoing, didn't it? And so as of right now, we still don't have Season 10 of RWBY, and I don't think we ever will, but I'm not so sure that's a bad thing. I'm not even sure if we'll even bother getting a reboot. Like, what people were saying before, that fanfic writers are keeping the series alive, I fully believe it, and this is where that ability to freeze enemies I was talking about comes in. Because look how useful that is. I'm creating barriers between myself and the enemy. They get dealt more damage, and they're vulnerable to heavy attacks and get absolutely destroyed. Of course, there's still heaps of them, so I'm still vulnerable, but this is far better defense than a lot of the other characters have. But as I was saying before, I just really think that RWBY had such charm before in its earliest days, and then after a while they started to get a little bit ambitious, thinking that they were good writers or that they were doing well, but it just wasn't happening. It wasn't working out. They had some gleaming golden moments here and there, but most of it just wasn't it. The fanfic writers genuinely do a great idea, and it doesn't make sense, does it? A lot of the fanfic writers for RWBY do wonderful for the series. They really have. I've read a few of them myself. Really well done. I've even had a couple of ideas with it myself, and I was planning on doing fanfic a few years ago, but I never ended up doing it. I just kind of fell out of love and just didn't really bother. I'd rather play games. Games are my forte. I like to write and everything, but why create fanfic when I can create my own work? Why not take the inspiration I had for this sort of franchise and several other franchises and go forward writing my own original thing? Create rather than corrupt, sort of thing. I wish more people did that. And not to sound controversial, but I got to put it out there, I feel like most people don't really say, the whole tragic passing of Monty Ohm and all that. I think Monty was a great guy, and he was an excellent fight coordinator when it came to animation, and he knew his stuff, and he knew how to tell stories through fighting, and he was great at displaying it through combat. But when it came to being a storyteller, I don't think he was really all that great outside of doing it through combat. When it came to traditional storytelling, I think Monty wasn't super great, and that's why trying to create his own world, it was mostly based off of loose ideas with no strong foundations, nothing substantial. And so when you get other people who are pretty much the equivalent of hack writers who think they know better, not to say that all their ideas were bad, but when the majority of your fan base, that quite literally ranges into the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, can all write and come up with better storylines than what you've produced, then perhaps you just need to rethink your story, eh? But I always thought that video games were a strong place that RWBY could thrive, and, well, they just haven't done it. Because this game, for how it looks and how it plays, it's not that bad. It just needed something a bit more intuitive than, like a horde-based, multiplayer game. Have a bit more of a single-player focus, tighter movement, more impactful combat. Just sort of narrow the scope of what they wanted to do. Quality over quantity and all that. And you can really tell by the way I speak that I'm running out of words to say, aren't I? I'd like to... Do any of you guys know RWBY? Any of you guys know much about it? Any of you guys have a favourite character or season or whatever? To me, I don't even know what my favourite season would be. I like 3 a lot, just because I like tournament stuff, but even then it wasn't a super great tournament arc or anything like that. It's the final chapters for me that really made that season. But I mean, otherwise, I quite liked 1 and 2 for what they were. Simple but innocently enough. 4 was okay, but it had a lot of problems. And I don't think 7 was actually all that bad, as weird as it is to say. Although for me, 5 and 8 are definitely the worst, I think. There's no denying that. A lot of people agree with that. As far as favourite character goes, I don't even know if I have a favourite RWBY character. I mean, back at the time it used to be Yang because I thought she was super cool, and RWBY was a close second because I just love the Crescent Rose. It's one of my favourite sights in anything ever. you know, alongside Death's Scythe from Darksiders and the scythe that Dante gets from Death and Dante's Inferno. You know, I still think Crescent Rose takes first place because it's just such a cool and unique weapon that you've never really seen anything like it before. It's so great. You know, Yang's Shotgun Gauntlet is still great, but at the time, yeah, Yang and Ruby were my favourites. Adam was also up there because I just love, like, you know, Virgil-like characters, and he definitely had immense potential to be one of the stronger characters in the entire show, and rightfully so. And there's been no shortage of, you know, stories made by fans and all these potential ideas about how to make Adam a more meaningful character or to deliver more on the idea of this really radical, extreme freedom fighter for the Faunus, but they turned him into a kind of almost rapey, evil, like scorned ex-lover, and I think it was a huge detriment, and they undermined his character, made him super weak all of a sudden. I just can't stand to see cool characters or characters with immense potential ruined like that. Like, him and Weiss didn't even get to meet, for God's sakes. And I don't know why, but like, you know, the gameplay is kind of dull at times when I'm talking more about fanfic ideas and shit like that instead of the actual game, because there's just nothing really else to go on about. But I do like this game a lot, and so I think it deserves its flowers. But shit, you know, when I was coming up with a fanfic idea that I once had, I think an old idea I used to have was the battle at the Beacon Academy still happens and everything, but it's Weiss that ends up encountering Adam, and she gets captured, but he doesn't kill her because he wants to use her as a bargaining chip so that he can trade her back to her father, so he can get information on where to find these labour camps that the Schnee family has been using Faunus labour for. And while he expected the father to cave in exchange for Weiss's safety, he denies it. So then Weiss has suddenly, you know, become useless as a bargaining chip, and Adam doesn't know what to do and decides ultimately to let her go, you know, taking the more noble path, saying there's no point in it. And even though at this time he'd still be working with Cinder and, you know, by extension Salem, for the sake of his own people and their prosperity, he decides to kind of keep it secret and let her go, as he goes off and tries his best to find these leper camps and do whatever he can to get his people back, and Weiss ends up tagging along instead of trying to escape, you know, feeling like she was abandoned, like she has nowhere to go, and so she decides to help him free his people, you know, feeling like she doesn't have much else to go or nowhere else to do. And yeah, the two of them would slowly grow and bond as she'd become more rebellious towards her father's schemes, and, you know, he'd help her see a different side of himself, and the two of them would grow closer. And whether you want to do a romance with that or not, or just simply have them being good friends that work in each other's best interests and try to repair the relations between their peoples, you could always go with that angle. And that's sort of what I was going for. Right, so this is getting a little bit tough here. I can't remember if I actually died in this last part here on my initial run of the mission. I remember it being way longer than this. This is definitely one of the more boring missions of the game, definitely one of the dullest. The later ones will be a lot more exciting because a lot more happens. But yeah, again, you can tell it's not balanced for single player. And these things really slow it down as well because they take a lot of hits. I mean, they're far from the worst Grimm in terms of, you know, what slows down the combat, because, you know, we haven't seen the worst of it yet. But the contrast. Like, this is a fresh new wave, and eventually once these Borbatusks are dealt with, we're going to have Beowulf coming in trying to kill us and destroy the control center. But we're on the final wave, and it's only just getting to the halfway point, or getting close to it, like a third of the way down. Whereas at this point in the previous chapter, the control center was nearly dead. Like, in its last quarter, it was on its last legs. Like, maybe it's because the environment's more open, or these enemies are programmed to go more after you than they are after the node, I don't know, but yeah. All I am is just grateful of it. Because I can remember when I tried the high difficulties on the first chapter and seeing just how brutal it was for that defense position and protecting the node. And then coming to this one, I was very worried as well, but, you know, I was quite happy to see that it was rather easy. Like, they weren't as aggressive towards it. More open areas, more chances for the Grimm to lose interest in it, and more chances for them to attack you. So we're coming up to the end of the chapter anyway. I'd say going forward, the next couple of chapters are pretty easy, all things considered. The next one just requires a bit of patience because there's one fight particularly that goes on way too long. I might speed that one up. The next fight, the next chapter, is very easy. It's one of the shortest. And then the chapter after that is when things start getting a little bit rough. Chapter 6 is also kind of rough for one particular fight. Then chapter 7, for the most part, is pretty rough. Chapter 8 is very tough. Chapter 9 isn't so bad until the final part, where it's a bit of a gauntlet fight, which I did beat first try, admittedly. But, you know, if you made any more mistakes than I did, you'd be toast, and it'd be a very, very long start back to the beginning of the fight. And the final chapter, I think, overall, is probably the hardest, mostly because of the boss and the final encounter there. But I'll show you more when we get to that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.